What I wanted to talk with you about here in this Case and Deaton article are some of the graphs. They show very clearly and painfully what's going on in the United States and also give us some comparisons with the rest of the world. The first thing is this one here is for the US and it's all cause mortality, so all the different reasons that people die by race and ethnicity, ages 50 through 54. Okay. And so then the axis here shows time on the X up through 2015. And then this shows deaths per 100,000 of population on the Y. And looking at it, you can see some big differences here overall if you just go back to the late 90s. And that is that white and non-Hispanic peoples have had the better or lower mortality rates. The African Americans or blacks, as they're referred to here, have the highest rates, and then white non-Hispanics with high school or less have rates that were intermediate between these two. But the real story here, as you can see, in general, there's been an improvement with Hispanics over time, and there's been an improvement of blacks over time. Now, to be sure, blacks still have higher mortality rates than whites, for example. It's not like they've just somehow exceeded all expectations, but there's been a general improvement, and this has been observed in much of the world. So the real anomaly or the theme, really, what we're looking at is what's happened with the white non-Hispanics, particularly those in this case with high school or less. And you can see that their mortality rates have gone up quite a bit over time from maybe 720 or so, I would guess, roughly where that is there, up to well in excess of 900. That's a big increase in less than 20 years. And so, now the other piece of this, not really our theme here, but Hispanics, I've done some scholarly work on this particular subject. If you just do 3 words there, you don't need to look this up, but if you're curious about this, how is it that the Hispanics, in spite of a lot of the disadvantages they have with less health insurance, with lower socioeconomic status in terms of education and income and so on, usually those are health risk factors, but for the Hispanic population at large in the United States, that's not the case overall. In fact, they've done very well. They've actually outdone the majority population here of whites. How do they do this? So my work on this, if you just go McGlade and then Latina Paradox, Paradox, you'll see some work I've done on that. It's really a whole another topic, though, so not what we want to engage ourselves with in this particular unit. Okay, so the first one is this rising rate here, and so that's cause for concern. There's generally been throughout recent human history, measured in the centuries, a gradual process of improvement. There's been some bumps along the way during major wars, like, for example, World War I and II. The working class population saw higher mortality rates, not just from warfare, but from deprivation in general and so on. But so this is going the wrong way here, clearly going the wrong way. In fact, going the wrong way in a big way. The second one I want to look at is page 46 here, and as you page through your own to look at these later, just note I'm not talking about the number up here, I'm talking about the number here, okay? So let's go down. So looking at figure 1.3, these are basically the same graphs. This one is just age adjusted a little bit over time as the population aged within that age group. There's a slightly different pattern here, as you can see. But let's just look at this one on the right. And what we see is these are other countries, okay? So make a note, like France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and Sweden, okay? Wow, I mean, look at this is through time. First of all, this gradual process of improvement I've talked about, where death rates fell literally from 1990, overall age-adjusted mortality rates from 1990 through 20, in this case, 14. Wow, if you look at that, that's quite an improvement. And all countries saw this general improvement over time, even though the differences between the countries are fairly large. So in the United States, our majority population, white, non-Hispanics, for a while looked like we were kind of hanging there. I mean, we had some of the worst numbers, but yeah, we're making progress, right? So until the late 90s, we were making progress. And then from there on out, and this is where I started studying this, and this is where I work with my students in Geography 106 for years on this topic. Look at this. Our rates go the other direction, okay? There is nothing like this in all of the highly developed countries, what we're seeing here in the United States. It's a major, major crisis. Gives me great pain to show that. And I do have old friends from high school, some of whom now are in these mortality statistics. And I'm in my 50s, late 50s. Sorry. And then let's go to page 47. We're going to look at figures 1.5 and 1.6. And so a lot of this are the so-called deaths of despair. So if you take drug, alcohol, and suicide mortality, men and women ages 50 to 54, again, we have these national comparisons. And again, our own red line is, this is US whites, is off the charts, okay? Not only worse, we're getting worse rapidly. This is a crisis. Let me ask you this. Does this bother you? Okay, if this doesn't bother you, I have nothing I can bother you with. This is really awful, just awful. And this helps us understand some of what's happening in our body politic in the United States. Okay. The next one, and this is going way back in the late 80s. I wasn't aware of this back then, and there wasn't really much. I mean, if you'd have just seen the graphs like right in here, you wouldn't have said much, right? No, it's like, well, maybe we're kind of going the wrong direction, but yeah, no big deal, right? Now, the geography, okay, this is Pacific Northwest geography. After all, we've been showing you national data. This is a problem here in the Pacific Northwest. If we just kind of do, the Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Northern California piece, more or less here, 2000, the darker the shading, the higher the mortality from drug, alcohol, and suicide, or the deaths of despair. You can see what's going on here. Wow. Big changes, big. This is really, really, it's getting worse, isn't it? Not in all areas, but overall, I mean, just compare this one, including Northern California, with this one. Wow. Yeah. So you can see that this is mostly not a urban problem. It's mostly a small town, rural problem. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show you. And a lot of this could almost be like a voting map. And what we've, in our history, of 2016, we had two highly unusual candidates for president. Who were those two highly unusual candidates? Hillary Clinton wasn't unusual. She was the usual. In fact, that was an objection a lot of people raised. Of course, the two unusual ones were Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, both of them very unconventional, and neither one of which probably would have gotten much traction if they would have run back in the 90s, even though they both could have done so age-wise. So there's some really difficult things happening in the Pacific Northwest, in our small towns and rural areas, and also in the rest of the country too, as you can see. It's not evenly distributed by any means, but definitely something going on. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through those graphs. Something to think about.